Kelsey?
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for having me. So this is a presentation that I do. It's about transitions, and it really covers a lot of different types of decisions that we might need to make for somebody who's living with dementia. And really, my focus on this is supporting the dignity and the comfort of the person during change. So there's kind of three different domains that will necessitate a change. So what gives, right? And it's usually something around safety, ability, or engagement. So these are kind of the three different domains that we want to look at to say, is it time to change? So let's dig in. So safety. So part of what happens in the dementia process is sometimes curiosity can override caution. Where the person still wants to do all of the things that they've always done, but may not be aware of the challenges they're having in completing those activities, or may not be able to look at themselves and see, I can't do that the way that I once did. And so that might look like things like driving erratically, making bad decisions with money. This is one that unfortunately I'm seeing more and more often in my practice. And it really has to do with the, AI and digital era that we're living in, being able to easily impersonate people. So there's a lot of ways that people can get into trouble around things like money. Leaving the stove on, I think we can all probably think of some environmental safety hazards that we've seen out in the field with dementia in the picture. So safety is kind of the big one that might necessitate a change, but safety can also look like the safety of the care partner or other people in the family in the home. So a care partner, the person who's most responsible for caring for somebody with dementia, might have physical challenges in providing care. So if somebody becomes a fall risk, right, they might not be able to assist them physically anymore. The psychological safety of the caregiver as they're experiencing things like complex grief, or there may be, the behaviors of the person are very distressing to the care partner. And so when we talk about safety, I'm not just talking about person living with dementia's safety, I'm talking about the safety of everyone around them too. And then also safety, for the care partner could look like requiring constant supervision. So we'll see care partners who are just kind of living in this state of hyper vigilance where they're really always on. And so they may not be sleeping well because they're always listening for what the other person is doing. And so when you're always on and you're in kind of that state of heightened emotion, heightened anxiety for long periods of time, that can really accumulate in a person's body and make it not a safe situation for them anymore. Ability. So there's times in caring for somebody with dementia where the person's skills that they're able to do don't match with the task or with the setting. So for example, vision changes, visual changes that happen over the course of dementia. So, and when I say this, I don't just mean like, is their eyesight good or do they have cataracts, right? There's actually visual changes that happen in the process of dementia where people will lose parts of their visual field. And so they may lose their periphery. They may have a difficult time understanding contrast, right? So being able to see differences in color, depth perception, right? And this becomes an issue with driving. It also becomes an issue with fall risk, right? So if somebody's walking and they're ambulating through their house and they can't see very well where the handrails are or something like that, that becomes an issue, right? That might necessitate a change in setting or require some additional assistance. People might also have a hard time sequencing or starting tasks. So the part of our brain that's responsible for that, our prefrontal cortex, or this part of our brain right behind, if you put your palm on your head, right behind there is your prefrontal cortex. And we see that impacted in almost all dementias. And that's the part of our brain that really helps us understand when we need to start an activity. So what it takes to get up and go brush your teeth, right? And then understanding all of the steps that are involved in that task, sequencing what comes next, right? So for people living with dementia, you may see them start a task, right? But then they'll get stuck in one step and they're not actually moving on to the next thing. They kind of get caught in a loop, right? And that interrupts our ability to do things like managing medications, cooking food, or even things like enjoying hobbies, right? Mobility changes also can make independent tasks more dependent on others. And so sometimes that physical changes can necessitate a change or a transition. And then I also like to talk about engagement. So dementia can make socializing and recreation more difficult, right? There might be a refusal to participate in activities that were once enjoyed. We know part of this comes from the stigma that people feel around dementia. People might understand that there's something going on with them and they don't want other people to perceive them differently because of the changes that are happening in their brain. Or they might be worried about doing the wrong thing, or they might go to a dinner party and not be able to follow the conversation because it's too fast. So there's too many things going on at once, right? And so they can become overwhelmed by that and just kind of start to shut down. People spend most of their days sleeping or in distress if they don't have adequate ways and pathways to engage. People might start an activity and then seem lost in the activity or lost in the shuffle. So sometimes the setting might be okay safety wise, but there's no engagement happening. And so for somebody living with dementia, that can be really important too. Sometimes I'll have calls from people that are living in maybe an assisted living facility, and the facility is great. It's beautiful, it's clean, they've got somebody to come give them their meds, they've got housekeeping, they've got, someone to help with the personal care tasks, but there's no engagement, there's no activity, there's no anything that's keeping that social, emotional health going. And so sometimes that can be the catalyst for looking for a transition. So here's a kind of overview. It's a very exciting visual that I made of all of the different kinds of long-term care settings. So I think I'll start with what is most people's preferred, and that is home with help. We know overwhelmingly, statistically, people desire to stay in their own homes. Now, for somebody living with dementia, this often means that you need to get some in-home care. And that assistance can be provided by a private agency, a home care agency that would send out caregivers. Some people also hire a caregiver privately. It might be somebody that owns their own business, and they might just hire that individual. Or it could be, a lot of times, it's friends and family that are providing this care, this additional assistance in the home. Now, another option for people is an adult family home. So an adult family home is typically a small home-like setting where care is provided by non-medical care staff. They may have some medical training, maybe be personal care aides or things like that, or home care aides. They might be a certified nurse's assistant. But really, they're relying on people that can provide kind of that assistance with daily living that's not nursing care. Is how I would probably describe it. So there can be some limitations to that if people are needing kind of things like wound care or something that's more advanced, or they need IV medications, that kind of thing. An adult family home may not be the most appropriate setting. So in an adult family home, people may have a private room with some shared spaces. I've also seen ones where people, are kind of in the same room and they have a shared bathroom. But generally, it's structured more like a home-like setting, which can be really helpful for people living with dementia, particularly if the person tends to be activated by the behaviors of others. I've seen somebody move from like a very large memory care facility to an adult family home, and we saw that their behaviors greatly decreased when they were in a smaller setting and they weren't so overstimulated. So all of these settings, I'll just give you a disclaimer, they can be the best or the worst thing, completely depending on the person, and they're not all designed the same. This is just a general guideline so you understand kind of what the differences between all of these different settings are. Continuing care. So we do have some continuing care communities in Bellingham. I will say they're not as prevalent as they are in larger urban metropolitan areas. But the idea of a continuing care community is that there's tiered levels of care based on what people are needing. So somebody may start in an independent living or an apartment-like setting, and then they may transition to assisted living or memory care or even skilled nursing. So they're all very different, but the idea is you kind of pay this one time and then you're in. And then as your needs progress, you've kind of got a contract with the facility and that kind of thing, so you don't have to worry about moving to a different facility. They vary greatly in their amenities and the way that they're set up and the way that they're managed. I've seen continuing care be a really good fit for spouses if maybe one spouse needs more assistance than the other. Um, but again, you want to be really careful and really cognizant of the contracts that you're signing and the setup fees because they might come with some hidden costs. So buyer beware. Assisted living, I think we're all probably familiar with that. So those are usually larger non-medical facilities that may offer help with housekeeping, meals, personal care. They're usually more like set up like individual apartments with maybe a shared dining room or a salon or activity room. Assisted livings are really across the board in the way that they're set up, managed, facilitated. I've seen assisted living facilities be the absolute best case scenario for somebody living with dementia. And I've seen them also be a nightmare for people living with dementia. It really, truly depends on the individual facility and their ability to manage dementia. A lot of times, the staff will not have training on working with people living with dementia. They may not have exact protocols for certain behaviors. The supervision and monitoring that they say they have might just be something like a camera in the hallway, which to me, that's not actual supervision. So, again, you just want to do your research when it comes to figuring out what's included in the cost of care. Now, a skilled nursing facility, this is what we usually think of as a nursing home, offers 24/7 medical supervision and care for people who need extensive assistance with activities of daily living. So they might need wound care or might have feeding tube or catheters or that kind of thing. So for people with kind of those advanced medical conditions, that really is the preferred setting. There are certainly people living with dementia living in skilled nursing facilities. I will say it's not like the typical, that's your first place you go. But a lot of times I've seen people discharged from the hospital to a skilled nursing facility and they might stay there until the end of their lives, or they might be there for a short period of time until discharging to something like a memory care facility. Memory care is just how it sounds. It's specialized care for people living with dementia. It usually includes some tailored activities for dementia. There's some additional safety precautions. You know, you might see something like what they call a delayed egress, which just means when you push on the door, it doesn't open right away. For people who have a tendency to elope or wander, I'm putting these in air quotes because we all have a tendency to elope and wander if we're being honest, right? So with a lot of the language that you'll see used around these facilities, you kind of just go like, oh, like these are people and it's their home, right? So I kind of always have to like rewire myself, like not to get into the technical jargon too much. And in the state of Washington, if you work in a specialized memory care facility, which it is a special designation for licensing, not all of them are, but if you look up and it is a specialized dementia care facility or an enhanced dementia facility, they do have to take some additional staff training. The current minimum standard, the last time I checked, was 8 hours. So to me, that's not very much dementia training. But for people that are working in a specialized memory care, they may have some additional. And a lot of the memory care facilities, too, if they're owned by a bigger conglomerate, they will have their own like proprietary education or curriculum for their staff. And of course, they all think their model is the best model. So all right, so that's my soapbox about the different kinds of long-term care settings. Okay, another transition that might happen is when we transition somebody into needing end-of-life care. So sometimes people will get palliative care and hospice mixed up. So I just made a quick graphic so that we can see the differences between them. So palliative care is really just an approach to care. It can happen at any point in a disease process. It can occur alongside curative treatment. So somebody could be receiving something like chemotherapy or dialysis or something like that, and also be receiving palliative care. It can be provided in any setting. So palliative care is where the patient is, right? Uh, Similar to hospice, the focus is on comfort, on reducing stress, relieving symptoms, and then providing that emotional and spiritual support for somebody with a terminal illness. Hospice is a specific type of palliative care. It's covered by Medicare, Medicaid insurance. So that's great, but it also means it needs a doctor to sign off saying that they think that somebody has 6 months or less to live. And it doesn't need to be a doctor. They've expanded the definitions of what a healthcare provider who can qualify somebody for hospice is, which is great for a lot of us who don't maybe